FBP family, welcome back for our third generation in our series of four. Dr. Sarah Marion joins us today. She is the Director of Syndicated Research at Murphy Research. Sarah, thank you so much for coming back to the Fitness Business Podcast.
I'm very excited to be back today. Thanks for having me.
Third time is a charm because you're talking about my generation. I'm super excited. I know I just gave my age away, but thank you so much for coming back. So I saw you, I've said this before, but I saw you at the URSA conference in South Beach, Florida. Loved your talk that you gave there. You and I, we connected and we came up with this idea along with JT that we'd have you come on to the Fitness Business Podcast and we do a series, which is the first time we've ever done this, and going through the four generations.
It's been really interesting for me as I've prepped, because I've also never looked at them kind of in succession like that. So I was really excited to do it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be so helpful for all of our business owners out there, or department heads, decision makers, whoever that may be, just to also kind of break it down and just to make sure that they're marketing and they're catering, if you want to use that word, to the different generations. I'm sure every fitness boutique out there, every fitness facility, every YMCA, whatever it may be, they have all four generations walking through the door. Today, we're going to talk about what Generation X wants from a gym and who Generation X, who they are. So why don't you start off with that? Go ahead, take it away.
Sure. So Gen X we define as those born between 1965 and 1980. That makes them ages 42 to 57 this year. It's a relatively small generation size-wise, and it's, as you might know, as a Gen X, in between two big, loud generations, right? Gen X are kind of generally the children of the silent generation who were kids during World War II. Whereas the big loud generations, you have millennials, who are the children of boomers, who are the children of the greatest generation. Those are the folks that fought World War II. That's just how it kind of works out. And now we have Gen Z coming along. A lot of them are the children of Gen X. And so it's interesting to see kind of these echoes of the generation between parents and children. And before we dive in, I just want to say a quick word about where all the data I'll be talking about comes from, because that's what I would want to know. So this all comes from the State of Our Health syndicated tracker. So I manage this study at Murphy Research. It's a subscription-based product, and we survey 1,000 unique US teens and adults every month. We've been doing it since 2018. So we have a huge data set, a lot of great time series data. It's about health and wellness. So we have high-level Gen Pop attitudes and activities, but then we deep dive into fitness, nutrition, and mindfulness. So if you want to learn more, come visit us at murphyresearch.com. And that's where all of this data comes from.
Well, I love the fact that you're bringing the data, because we have a lot of listeners out there that they are data junkies. And again, that's why we brought you on. I loved your background. I love what you're doing. I just have to laugh because about, my generation, my absolute favorite thing is on TikTok when they do like the, this is what Generation X is all about. Then they show like stuff from my child, the 80s, the late 80s, early 90s childhood. I love that, like riding bikes and, we had
party lines.
Yeah, our cell phones were the phone with the cord, and we were stretched around hiding behind the refrigerator so our parents wouldn't hear our phone conversations, things like that.
I did that too. I hid in a closet.
Yes. All right. Well, let's get back to Gen X and their approach to health. Could you review with all of our listeners out there what you found with their approach to health?
Sure. So Gen X is really kind of fully into middle age at this point. And so their approach is really defined by middle-aged needs. And I know that sounds really unsexy, but like there's a lot going on there. So middle-aged adults are actually a really interesting and valuable target for health and wellness brands, and for fitness in particular. Their lives are characterized kind of as a group, speaking generally here, by really regular, consistent routines, right, around work and around family. So across all the age groups, they have the highest levels of employment. That means they have the highest levels of income. So this is a group with some money to spend and really stable lives. So they're juggling a lot of responsibilities, but their lives are much less in flux than, say, millennials in their 20s and 30s who are starting families, who are still building careers, and they have more financial resources. The other reason that they're an interesting target is health and wellness becomes a more pressing concern in middle age, right? You have the experience to see what can go wrong. and you're starting to think of the future in longer terms. So in terms of overall priorities, what we see in the data is that career advancement kind of decreases in importance because you've built that career already. So, again, speaking generally here, spending time with loved ones goes up. So your priorities are shifting, and physical health goes up in importance too. So taking care of yourself gets more important. And part of that is because, this is when the future takes real shape. You want to see your kids graduate. You want to see them build families of their own. You want to retire in good health. You're starting to see that as an end goal in a way that, is a little bit less resonant if you're in your 30s. And so, in fact, middle-aged consumers actually have really high rates of spending across fitness categories, across nutrition categories. They're willing to invest. That's why they're, I think, so exciting. They get kind of a bad rep, but we should be paying more attention. Now, in terms of health motivations, they're really guided by those priorities, which makes sense, right? So like preventing disease, preventing future issues, kind of dealing with current issues starts to take on more urgency than you see among, say, millennials. Living like a better life for longer is a real concern because they've now seen what happens when you don't take care of your health. Keeping up with teenage kids is a motivation. So we hear that a lot. And then managing stress, maintaining work-life balance is kind of a holistic component. That's also really important, especially when it comes to fitness. At the same time, these people aren't fully into, senior life yet. They still care in a way that boomers are much less likely to care about looking good, about maintaining what they've got. Like they still want to look good. They need to lose some weight maybe, but that's still relatively important. So they're balancing those kind of like older and younger needs. And I think really key for Gen X is also balancing. I think of it as like what they should do, what they want to do, and what they can actually do. In a way that is different than it for younger consumers. So nutrition, this means like balancing eating for health, eating for pleasure, pleasing all the people in your household. And then of course, you've also got time and effort and budget. And it's the same in fitness. So what's sustainable for you now might not be what you used to do when you were younger, if that makes sense.
Complete sense. Complete sense. As a matter of fact, the other, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I got referred to as a middle-aged woman. I was around.
Not a fun time. Sorry.
And he didn't mean any harm by it, but I was working alongside of him and he was describing me to somebody and he said, well, she's like middle-aged. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, well, like, and he meant no harm by it, but I just about damn near died.
I was a lot of this comes from, I was preparing a report a few months ago about midlife consumers and realized that I was that group too. It was the first realization. And then, yes, I suppose the math works out.
Well, if you could share with all of our listeners the difference between the middle-aged females of Gen X and the middle-aged males of Gen X. I know I asked you this question before, but I think it's a really good one for you to just explain the difference between the males and the females.
Yes. A lot of these gender differences that I've been talking about are very similar across generations. And I think we discussed this last time. Sometimes it's a little bit depressing how similar they are. So for Gen X, men, once again, are more likely than women to be engaged with fitness. And they tend to be a little bit more engaged in terms of doing more activities, doing them more often, but not a whole lot. So they're a little bit more likely to exercise than Gen X women are. But this is the age when wearable fitness trackers really start taking on a lot more importance. So men and women are equally likely to wear them. And that's because the approach to fitness tends to shift around this age from devoted time to fitness, which is what we see among millennials, to an active through the day approach, right? So the focus on steps rather than like types of exercise. And this really picks up among boomers. But we're not talking about boomers today. We're talking about Gen X. Gen X men are a lot more likely to say they were encouraged to play sports from an early age. So that tracks along with this higher level of fitness engagement. And in fact, the gender gap there is really large. And so what that tells me is that fitness is something that a lot of Gen X Gen X women might have come to later in life rather than as teenagers, which is quite different than younger women. Men are also more likely to have gym memberships. We'll dig into this more a little later, but women are a little bit pickier about what they're looking for in a gym. And we also have, I think, related to that kind of coming later in life to fitness, Gen X women are a lot more likely than men to say that they just actually don't enjoy exercise. And that becomes a bigger barrier for them. So they struggle more, not surprisingly, with motivation. this is true no matter what generation you're looking at, but a lot of women locate their barriers internally, as in it's me that doesn't like to do it. It's I can't find the motivation. I can't find the energy. I don't like exercise. Whereas men are more likely to put those barriers externally. It's my career. It's my family demands. I just don't have time for exercise because these other things are crowding into my time. Now, I think there's probably truth to both of those approaches, but the general pattern has always been interesting to me because internal barriers are harder to overcome in marketing than external. And I think also important for Gen X women, they just feel less permission to spend on fitness than men do, and more than younger women as well. I think that especially coming from a background where perhaps fitness was not something you were encouraged to do, that makes it even harder for them to kind of find the permission to spend that money and that time on themselves. Whereas I think that comes a little bit easier to millennial women.
Yeah, it's interesting you said about the Gen X women tend, and we're not talking about all, but just what the studies say, that they tend to have the lack of motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that. I understand that. Not that there aren't some men out there that also lack the motivation.
Right.
Overall, I can see that. But I don't know about you, and please correct me. I also feel like the Gen X with the women also are a little more self-conscious about what they look like and coming into the gym, where I don't know if the men are quite as self-conscious. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't think that you're wrong. I think that if fitness is something that you were always kind of a half-hearted participant in, and you get to this place, middle age, where, let's face it, like women often feel invisible, then yeah, you're going to be a little bit intimidated about going into the gym. I think if you're already feeling self-confident about who you are and what you look like at this stage in life, then it's going to be difficult to get yourself into a place where a lot of it is driven by younger people's needs, which is around appearance.
Good stuff, Sarah. All right, let's get back to the data and let's talk about Gen X's approach to fitness.
I had a respondent that I interviewed sum it up really well. What she said was her approach to fitness was necessary, sustainable, and efficient. This is not a sexy approach, but it is a realistic approach. And I think that really captures Gen X and kind of this middle phase of life. So they're not going out of their way to organize their lives around health and wellness or fitness in the ways that we see millennials doing, frankly. Fitness needs to fit into their lives as their lives already are. Again, this is a part-time in life where you're juggling a lot. You've got a lot of things on your plate. You don't really have room necessarily to organize yourself around going to the gym. Going to the gym needs to fit within those other responsibilities. Because of that perspective and that life stage, which is quite a bit different than millennials, they're a little bit more like boomers in their approach. So they're shifting to lower intensity activities, right? They're shifting more toward calorie burning over muscle building. Weight becomes a bigger concern. So feeling better and losing weight are the top motivations for fitness for Gen X. They're also really motivated by reducing stress and kind of managing mood. So that kind of mental health component is really similar to millennials and high up in their rankings. We've talked about this before, but I think this is a really great benefit to talk about in the fitness industry because it's immediate. You get it right away and it's very tangible. And it's something that people are really looking for these days in particular.
I was going to ask you about that because I loved when you talked in the other two episodes about the mental wellness, and definitely the two younger generations are more in tune to that, obviously, because it's talked about a lot more on TV, social media, in schools, things like that. So how's Gen X with the mental, is that top of their list, or are they just now starting to learn about that, like yoga and mindful wellness type classes and incorporating that into their workout?
They are doing that, but not to the extent that, say, millennials are doing it, but it's very much there. I had that same question. Does that holistic mental health component reach this far into this age group? And it does. I suspect that some of that is uptake from their children, because when you look at sources of influence, kids is very high. If you have children at this life stage, Gen X considers them a very important source of information. So they're getting some of that stuff from their kids. There is I don't think it's very clear in the data, there's a divide within Gen X. And so there's younger Gen X are much more interested in that mental health component, and older Gen X are much less. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later, because there's actually a lot of differences between this older and younger group, whether that's a generational thing or just because, at about age 45 or 50, things really change for you. We're not exactly sure, but definitely the mental component is there. Stress management is there. The mood boost, they really are looking for that. And I think that this is like a really resonant benefit that we could make more of in the fitness industry.
Okay, so let's kind of move forward here. I'm really curious. What is Gen X's, what's their thoughts about the gym?
Their thoughts about the gym. So this is a life stage when people really shift. Again, they shift down the intensity of their activities. Walking really ramps up. So walking now is by far most people's main form of physical activity. The running declines, team sports decline, but weight training remains the same. And then other things like yoga and bar also go down. So those are other things that bring people into the gym. Now, I think that will change as millennials get older because those are kind of millennial staples. They might be a little bit too trendy, have hit this age group too late. So their thoughts around the gym. Again, there's this break between younger and older Gen X. So at about age 45, gym memberships really takes a dive among this age group. So something is happening at about that age that either drives people away from the gym or they were never members to begin with. And we, can't tell that in our data. I suspect there is a generational thing here going on. I suspect that younger Gen X, perhaps more women were socialized into fitness, perhaps men were encouraged to participate in fitness in a different way because we see this gap like across the data in a lot of different areas. But this turning point is really important for us to understand because regardless of what's going on, we want to keep those folks in the gym, right? Men and women. So gyms have to be easy to fit into their lives. Just like I said before, their approach to fitness is fitness has to fit, not, I fit my lives around fitness. So it's a busy group. Their activities have shifted into these long haul activities, things like walking, things that are going to keep them healthy for longer. So there's a group that the gym is really important for their motivations, for their routines. They stick with the gym. But for others, the value equation around whether you're going to go to the gym, should I pay for it or not, focuses much more on convenience. And could I do this activity some other way? So this is a different valuation than millennials are bringing to the gym. Millennials will pay for something if it gets them to do the activities that they want. Whereas Gen X are more interested in, is it worth paying for if I'm not really going to go? I have to be able to go. It has to make fitness more convenient or more motivating for me somehow. Again, because of the big shift that happens towards walking at this age, sometimes that value equation becomes less worth it if you can just go walking in your neighborhood, if that's easier than going to the gym. When it comes to actually how they actually choose the gym, not surprisingly, like convenience related factors are really important. So there's convenient location. They want hours of operation that align with the hours that they're going to be there. And that's not necessarily 24 hours, right? Because it's the younger ones that want to go to the gym in the middle of the night. But they want to know that they could go in the evening. So for instance, I interviewed this woman whose gym had shifted toward closing at 7 p.m. rather than at 10 p.m. And it meant that she couldn't work out there anymore because those were the only hours that she had. So she had to lose her membership. The other interesting thing I mentioned at the beginning is that this is a group with some financial resources to bring. And so in addition to convenience things, they care more than other generations do about amenities like hot tubs and spas. They want a nice locker room. They want cleanliness and good atmosphere, of course. And they're a little bit more likely to want to be with what we call like-minded people. And I suspect that this means people that look like them, a more mature mix so that they're not feeling self-conscious. And I think this is interesting because it means that they're willing to pay a little bit more to get a little bit more. And those are the things that make the gym worth going to, right? You can give yourself a little reward at the end, maybe go sit in the hot tub or the sauna, and that helps make it worthwhile to go to the gym.
I see that with the men a lot. With all my years of working in the club, I have to admit, if you just sitting here, I'm like, oh my gosh, so many with being, again, being in sales department, that was uber important. The dry sauna, the wet sauna, they always wanted to see the locker rooms. I always found that fascinating. So interesting that you say that.
Yeah, I think that they know what they want and they want it to be nice. And they've got some money, they can pay for it to be nice. In addition, rest and recovery, being able to get up and do it again the next day starts to become a really important concern in this age. That's what I meant by like necessary, sustainable, and efficient. That's the sustainable part. So you need to be able to do your exercise, but you also need to be able to do it again the next day. And I think a lot of those nice amenities help with that, or at least people think they do.
Right.
I think they do.
Right. And sometimes it's just a matter of, mental, you think, and that's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Love for you to continue on here on why Gen X, like why they wouldn't join a gym.
So again, I think that shift to lower impact activities, especially walking, that helps drive people, I think, from the gym because you think, oh, I can do that for free, even if you don't. Again, there's that generational split. I think that older Gen X may have a different sense of what the gym can give them than younger Gen X, especially women. For the whole generation, though, busy lives mean, again, that fitness has to fit where it can, and going to the gym takes extra time that might not exist in their lives just yet. I also think, I haven't mentioned this yet, but because we're talking about a group with resources, I think home gyms take away people that would otherwise be gym regulars. And I think this got much worse during COVID, worse for gyms, better for potentially the people doing it. So this is the group, they have the money and they have the space to set up home gyms. You can't set up a home gym if you live in a tiny apartment in the city, right? But if you live out in the suburbs and have a garage, have some money, you can set up yourself a nice gym. And so there's this group of gym buffs or former gym buffs who now have a gym at home.
Do you have any advice, or did the data talk about how to market to Gen X to get them out of the home gym?
Out of the home gym. Well, I think again, those amenities, it's hard to get those at home, right? So to be able to go use the nice showers, to go to the steam room, to sit in that hydro massage chair, that makes the gym a little bit more of a pleasant place to go work out. Swimming is a lower impact activity that starts to ramp up at this age. Hard to do that at home, even if you have a pool. They're usually not the size that you need for a good workout. The truth is that I really think it's the social factor that gets those home gym people out. So if they need other people around to help push them, that's what's going to send them to the gym. And that's just a kind of a personality difference, I think.
Okay, so the data didn't really talk about whether they found that the Gen X was more social at the gym.
I think that at this point, so they're different. The younger you are, the more social you want to be at the gym. And by the time you get to this age, there's a clear number of people that want to be where their friends and family are. They go to the gym to have that social experience. And there's others that don't. They're going to the gym because that's where the equipment are. And those are the people that if they have the means and the space and the time, if they set up a gym at home, then they don't really need the gym anymore.
So, Sarah, as we wind down here on our interview today about the awesome generation of X, is there anything from the data and the research that maybe you'd like to add that maybe I didn't ask, or maybe one of our questions didn't hit upon?
Well, I think barriers are always useful to understand. And we've talked about time and energy, motivation, but I also think that it's important for us to remember that injury becomes a bigger barrier for this age group compared to younger ones. And from qualitative interviews, it's injury that often pushes Gen X into those lower intensity activity regimens. You might have been playing on a soccer team and you get injured and you can't go back. So you have to find some new way of getting exercise. Some of those amenities that we just discussed help with that rest and recovery component. So important to remember that for this age group.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I mean, honestly, I sit here, I'm like, I know I could ask you 10 more questions, but we only have time for so much. So as I always like to say, if any of our FBP family out there, if they want to continue this conversation with you, or they have questions, please, everybody, feel free. I have all of Sarah's contact information in our show notes. Don't hesitate to reach out to her. I know she would be more than happy to answer the questions as best as she can from the research and the data.
Yes, I would love to hear from people.
All right, Dr. Sarah, another successful episode. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.